What's up, everyone? Welcome to Akuma Studies, and today we are talking about the iconic A11 wristwatch. Wristwatches in World War II has been a subject that I've been wanting to make a video about for a while. World War II was an exceptionally crazy part of our history. It had seen some very crazy things. If you're familiar with the Dunkirk movie that just came out recently, or Saving Private Ryan, or many of the iconic movies that have came out recently, or maybe you've watched World War II documentaries. As watch guys, we always have to ask ourselves, how do wristwatches play a role in this time period in history? And I'm going to be talking about the watch that many people in the United States Army Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Air Force, and the Soviet Air Force wore. Once again, the American A11 wristwatch. This watch began being produced in 1940 to 1949, and America had this thing called the Lend-Lease system. I don't know the exact date in 1940. However, I believe Pearl Harbor was in. You know what? I'm going to search it up very quickly. Yes, Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7th, 1941, meaning that this wristwatch is produced for the wartime, before the United States entered World War II. So this wristwatch was under the Lend-Lease program. So that means America, basically Woodrow Wilson had this idea. He and the United States of America would become I believe he said the arsenal, the armament, or something like that for the I don't know, democratic world or whatever, right? So they made guns, tanks, wristwatches in this case, certain specific parts, and they sent them to places like China, who was fighting a war in Japan, the Soviet Union, who was fighting a huge land war against Nazi Germany. They gave it to the British, who were fighting in North Africa, along with the Canadians, the Australians, the New Zealanders, South Africans, and whoever else they deemed to be a critical component in fighting the Axis powers. The size of this wristwatch was 32 to 36 millimeters, so it's very in line with the old school wristwatch sizes. Very different, this watch, than the German pilots' wristwatches. Those were exceptionally large, so the Allies didn't have watches as large, at least not the A11. It was produced by Elgin, very prestigious company. I believe they are currently, I think they're out of the business of watchmaking. However, at school, at Sterling Community College, I was just in the library and I look at the clock and it's an Elgin clock, so I guess maybe they may be still making clocks. Belova, which is a very iconic American company. I would love to review some of their wristwatches, and I would love to make a history video about their company because they have done a lot of great things. And last but not least, Waltham. Waltham, I believe they make some pretty sick chronographs, so if you're interested in that, go look it up. These World War II wristwatches did not have sub-seconds. The United States Army put out a list of very specific demands for this wristwatch. I believe they wanted to be luminous, water resistant, within plus or minus 30 seconds of time. I believe a 52-hour power reserve. I believe they wanted all of the dials to be black. And these were, I don't want to say standard issue, but the United States said, hey, these are our specifications for a wristwatch that we want. And these three companies I mentioned, Elgin, Belova, Waltham, filled out that criteria and started pumping out the wristwatches. In total, I want to say they made over 100,000, under 300,000 of these wristwatches. So they're fairly popular. They go for about $300 to $1,000, depending on condition, depending on the time period. Because these were made from 1940 to 1949, some of these wristwatches haven't seen action. And if you find a I'm sure you could find the serial numbers and whatnot. That's my dog. And figure out when the date was produced. However, remember, anything made after 1945 most likely never made it into World War II. So keep that in mind. The ones that are in very good condition might not have been in the war. So, some concluding thoughts. The A11, um, it's funny because I've been learning a lot about World War II lately, and the Soviet Union was really getting its ass whooped by Nazi Germany. Um, the Germans were pushing deep within Soviet territory, and the Soviets had to take all of their industry and pack it up and move it. So while the war was going on, Soviets were losing many cities, many territories, many factories to the Germans, and at the same time moving huge amounts of their industry. So they were in dire straits. They needed someone who could help them produce things, right? So the British would send them very important things like ball bearings, um, which are very important for wartime whatever's. Very specific small things that they needed, that when your industry is packing up, maybe you only have one ball bearing factory and it's in transit, and it needs to be built, and for a whole year you don't have ball bearings. Your wartime industry is going to be screwed. The United States sent them tanks, sent them airplanes, and interesting enough, they sent them wristwatches also. So these were just as important as the gun that they used, the ammo that was spent, the planes, the tanks. A good timekeeping device is very important for a pilot. If you've watched Dunkirk, the pilot's constantly checking his wristwatch to go, okay, I've been flying for this long. My plane uses this much amount of fuel. So therefore, if I've been out here for 5 hours, my plane uses 50 gallons of fuel, then 5 times 5, okay, I've used 250 gallons of fuel. My plane has 600. Maybe it's time for me to head back to base, or whatever. So that's a little bit about the American A11 wristwatch. I'd love to hear what you think. If you want to check it out on eBay or Etsy, the links are in the description. I encourage you to go look it out. Believe it or not, I saw this pretty sick long jeans at a store called Arc Watchworks at Northgate. I believe it was for about $1,000. But at first I was looking at it, I was like, is this a World War II wristwatch? It's not the A11 because it has a sub-seconds hand. But it looks very much from the era. They were saying it was from the 50s, but I don't know any watches from the 50s that look like that. So I'm thinking actually it's probably late 40s, maybe even World War II era. So I'm going to go in there, take some pictures, see if I can find any serial numbers on the back, and we'll see if it's a World War II wristwatch. Anyways, thank you very much for watching the video. Bakuma out.